It is dawn on the 17th of November 1922, and the last ruler of the Ottoman Empire is being smuggled out of his own palace. Sultan Mehmed VI Vahideddin climbs into a British military ambulance through a small garden gate at the back of the harem. No ceremony, no retinue, no farewell. His 10-year-old son, Shehzad Mehmed Ertugrul, grips his hand. General Sir Charles Harrington of the British Occupation Force escorts them through the rain to a motorboat on the Bosphorus, and from there to the battleship HMS Malaya, anchored offshore. The Sultan does not take the royal jewels. He does not take the sacred relics of the Prophet Muhammad. He burns his documents, packs his personal belongings, and leaves. He had ruled an empire that lasted 623 years. 36 sultans before him sat on the Ottoman throne. Their territory once stretched across 5 million square kilometers, from the gates of Vienna to the coasts of North Africa, from the Balkans to the Arabian Peninsula, the longest-lasting Islamic dynasty in recorded history. And it ends like this: a sick old man in the back of an ambulance, slipping away before the city wakes. But the Sultan's flight was only the beginning. Within 18 months, the Grand National Assembly of the new Turkish Republic would expel the entire Ottoman Dynasty. 156 princes, princesses, consorts, and their children, each given 1,000 British pounds, a one-way passport, and 24 hours to leave. Their exile would last 50 years. One princess, known as the Butterfly of Istanbul, would die of tuberculosis in Nice while a loyal servant begged on the streets for soup money. One prince would be found dead of hunger in a public park. Another would spend 64 years in a rent-controlled Manhattan apartment, paying $390 a month, refusing to carry any nation's passport because he still considered himself a citizen of the Ottoman Empire. And one woman, granddaughter of both the last sultan and the last caliph, would become Egypt's first lady, only to be exiled for a second time. This is what happened to the Ottoman bloodline after 623 years of empire, and how the children of sultans became taxi drivers, cafe musicians, and ghosts of a dynasty the world tried to erase. The Ottoman Empire began around 1299, when a Turkish tribal leader named Osman carved out a small territory on the frontier of the dying Byzantine Empire in northwestern Anatolia. What started as a border principality grew over the next 2 centuries into one of the most formidable states the world had ever seen. In 1453, Sultan Mehmed II breached the walls of Constantinople, ending the Byzantine Empire and claiming the city as the new Ottoman capital. It was the defining act of the dynasty. From that moment, the Ottomans ruled from Istanbul for nearly 500 years. The empire peaked under Suleiman the Magnificent, who reigned from 1520 to 1566. At its height, Ottoman territory encompassed 5.2 million square kilometers, covering southeastern Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula. 36 sultans governed from 3 successive capitals: Bursa, Edirne, and finally, Constantinople. They commanded armies that besieged Vienna, navies that dominated the Mediterranean, and a bureaucratic machine that administered dozens of languages, religions, and peoples across 3 continents. This was the world Ottoman children were born into. Marble corridors, gilded ceilings, and the ever-present awareness that their blood made them both powerful and expendable. For centuries, a brutal tradition called fratricide ensured that rival princes would not threaten a new sultan's rule. When a sultan died, his successor often executed all his brothers. Later, this was replaced by confinement in the cafes, a set of secluded palace chambers where princes lived in luxurious imprisonment, sometimes for decades. To be born Ottoman was to be born into a dynasty where power and peril were indistinguishable. But by the 19th century, the empire was in irreversible decline. Tsar Nicholas I of Russia called it the sick man of Europe around 1853, and he was not wrong. Greece won its independence in 1830. Algeria fell to France the same year, The Congress of Berlin in 1878 stripped away Bulgaria, Romania, Serbia, and Montenegro. The Ottoman treasury declared bankruptcy in 1875. The Tanzimat reforms attempted modernization but only accelerated nationalist movements among the empire's minorities. The Young Turk Revolution of 1908 restored constitutional government briefly, but a coup in 1913 handed power to the three pashas, who would lead the empire into catastrophe. They entered the First World War on October 29, 1914, siding with Germany and Austria-Hungary. The gamble failed. The empire mobilized roughly 3 million men. 2/3 became casualties. The Armistice of Mudros on October 30, 1918, ended Ottoman sovereignty in all but name. Allied troops occupied Istanbul within weeks. Mehmed VI inherited this wreckage. Born on January 14, 1861, at Dolmabahce Palace, he was the youngest of Sultan Abdülmecit's 42 children. His mother died of cholera when he was 4. 10th in line for the throne, he spent decades in quiet obscurity, studying calligraphy, Sufism, and the Kanun, a stringed instrument he would play until the day he died. He became crown prince only in 1916 and ascended the throne on July 4, 1918, 4 months before the armistice. His reign was defined by an impossible contradiction. Under Allied occupation, Vahid-ad-Din cooperated with the victors to preserve the dynasty. At the same time, he dispatched Mustafa Kemal Pasha to Anatolia on April 30, 1919, as inspector of the Ninth Army. Kemal used the appointment to organize a nationalist independence movement instead. The Sultan's most consequential act directly created the force that would destroy the Sultanate. On November 1, 1922, the Grand National Assembly abolished the Sultanate. Vahid-ad-Din fled 16 days later. His household included 5 consorts and 4 children. His senior wife, Nazikeda Kadın, was a Circassian princess born in 1866 who would die in Cairo in 1941, known as the Last Empress. His daughters Fatma Ulviye and Rukia Sabiha survived into the 1960s and 1970s respectively. His only son, Shehzad Mehmed Ertuğrul, was the boy who left Istanbul clutching his father's hand at the age of 10, and the man who would replace Vahid-ad-Din as a figurehead, his cousin Abdülmecid II, elected ceremonial caliph on November 19, 1922, was a painter, pianist, cellist, and polyglot who quoted Shakespeare's Hamlet to describe his own suffering. He would hold the caliphate for barely 16 months. On March 3, 1924, the Grand National Assembly voted to erase the House of Osman from Turkey and from existence. The debate lasted 7 hours. Only 5 deputies voted against. Law number 431 abolished the caliphate and ordered the expulsion of every member of the Ottoman dynasty. All male and female descendants, their sons-in-law, and even children born to women of the B dynasty. Turkish citizenship was revoked. All immovable property was to be liquidated within 1 year or seized by the state treasury. Each family received a one-time payment of approximately 1,000 British pounds, enough for a train ticket and perhaps a month of modest living abroad. The law officially granted 10 days to leave. In practice, princes received 24 hours. The caliph himself was expelled before sunrise. Abdülmecid was informed that night. He refused at first. "I am not a traitor," he said. "I will not leave here even if I die. How can they forcibly remove me from these lands that my ancestor Fatih conquered?" But Republican troops surrounded Dolmabahce Palace at 5 a.m. on March 4, 1924. His family was driven to Çatalca Station, not the main Circassian terminal where officials feared public demonstrations, and put on the Simplon Express bound for Switzerland. 156 named dynasty members were expelled, including servants who refused to leave their masters. The total reached into the hundreds. They departed mostly by train from Circassian Station, the same station where the Orient Express terminated, the gateway between Europe and the Ottoman world. The family believed the exile would last months. It lasted 28 years for women and 50 years for men. Nice on the French Riviera became the dynasty's unofficial capital in exile. So many Ottomans settled there that local patisseries stayed open late during Ramadan. Others scattered to San Remo, Cairo, Alexandria, Vienna, Damascus, Beirut, Albania, Jordan, and Bulgaria. The Turkish Republic issued them one-way passports valid for only 1 year. By 1925, most members of the dynasty were stateless. Ankara actively worked to keep them marginalized, pressuring foreign governments not to employ dynasty members and monitoring their movements. The Sultan, meanwhile, was dying in Italy. After his flight from Istanbul, Vahideddin had traveled from Malta to Egypt and finally to San Remo, where Mussolini's government provided a villa, with expenses paid. But his money disappeared. Approximately £20,000 brought from Istanbul, much of it gambled away or stolen by his chief aide, who was later discovered to be on Ankara's payroll. He composed music. He played his kanun every day. He carried a revolver at all times, fearing assassination. Under his pillow when he died were prescriptions for medicines he could not afford to buy. On May 16, 1926, Mehmed VI died at the age of 65. Creditors placed a lien on his coffin and sealed the door of his villa. His daughter Rukiye Sabiha scraped together donations. King Faisal I of Iraq and King Abdullah I of Jordan paid off the remaining debts. The coffin, bearing no flowers, was transported by a horse-drawn ambulance belonging to the Green Cross of San Remo. An Italian witness at the train station said the procession was unworthy of a king. He was buried at the Selimiye Mosque in Damascus. His remains are still there. His only son never recovered. Shehzadeh Mehmed Ertuğrul was 14 when his father died. He refused to accept his mother's remarriage in Egypt and never saw her again. On July 2, 1944, he collapsed during a tennis match and died. He was 31. He never married. He had no children. The last sultan's direct male line ended on a tennis court in Cairo. Ottoman princes had been trained exclusively as soldiers, skills useless in foreign countries where they held no citizenship, no work permits, and no professional credentials. They took whatever they could find. Dynasty members worked as taxi drivers, porters, cemetery guards, museum ticket sellers, peddlers, and dishwashers. Many princes played instruments in cafes, their musical training being their only marketable skill. Aishi Sultan, daughter of Sultan Abdulhamid II, sold everything she owned and hand-embroidered the Quranic verse, "Allah is with those who are patient," on fabric. Her sons sold these on the streets and in the Paris metro at night. Families secretly collected spoiled fruits and vegetables from markets after dark. As children grew, parents cut the tips off their shoes because they could not afford new ones. Shehzadeh Ahmed Nouri was found dead of hunger in a park. Shehzadeh Abdurrahim Hayri, a decorated veteran who had fought at Verdun, took his own life, unable to endure the poverty. And then there was Fehime Sultan, born in 1875, daughter of Sultan Murad V, known in Istanbul as a composer of waltzes and military marches and in Nice as the Butterfly Princess. Her husband stole all her money and fled. Though relatives, including the Caliph himself, lived nearby, dynastic feuds meant no help came. She survived only through a loyal servant who begged on the streets of Nice at night, collecting a few francs to cook soup for her dying mistress. Fahim died of tuberculosis in 1929, destitute. Abdulmecid II, the last caliph, fared better than most, but only because of foreign charity. After his expulsion, he settled first in Switzerland, then in Nice, supported by a lifetime pension of £300 per month from the Nizam of Hyderabad. Then considered the wealthiest man on earth. He painted prolifically. He played piano and cello, spoke French like a native, and quoted Shakespeare's Hamlet on his condition. On August 23, 1944, during the liberation of Paris, stray bullets flew into his villa. He suffered a fatal cardiac arrest at 76. Turkey refused to allow his burial in Istanbul. His body was preserved at the Grand Mosque of Paris for nearly 10 years. Finally, in 1954, King Saud of Saudi Arabia arranged burial at the Jannat al-Baqi Cemetery in Medina. The exile was lifted in stages. In 1952, women were allowed to return. Men waited until 1974. Ertuğrul Osman, grandson of Sultan Abdülhamid II, became known as the last Ottoman. He settled in a rent-controlled apartment on Lexington Avenue in Manhattan in 1953, paying $390 a month for 56 years. He considered himself a citizen of the Ottoman Empire and refused to carry any passport. When offered amnesty in 1974, he declined. "We do not need amnesty since we have not done anything wrong." He finally accepted a Turkish passport in 2004, after September 11th security requirements made travel impossible otherwise. When he visited Dolmabahce Palace in 1992, he insisted on joining a regular tour group rather than accepting a private showing. He said he did not want a fuss. He died in September 2009 at age 97. His funeral at the Sultan Ahmed Mosque drew 10,000 mourners. His coffin, draped with the imperial Ottoman standard, was carried through streets lined with people who had never known the empire but understood what it meant. Today, approximately 100 descendants of the Ottoman Dynasty are scattered across Turkey, the UK, France, Germany, the US, and other countries. The current head of the House of Osman is Shehzada Harun Osmanoğlu, 93 years old, living in Istanbul. Born in exile, he returned in 1974 without speaking Turkish. The newest member, Shehzada Mehmed Selimhan Osmanoğlu, was born on July 17, 2024, extending the bloodline into another generation. In May 2025, Istanbul's 12th Civil Court confirmed 71 individuals as legal heirs of Sultan Abdülhamid II, but the 1924 confiscation laws remain in force. What was taken has not been returned. The palaces belong to the Republic now. Topkapı became Turkey's first national museum in 1924. Dolmabahce stands preserved. Its clock stopped at 9:05 a.m., the moment Ataturk died there in 1938. The House of Osman endures, not because anyone in power wanted it to, but because the family refused to disappear. And they are not the only dynasty that was torn from its throne and scattered. The Romanovs ruled Russia for 300 years until the night Tsar Nicholas and his entire family were led into a basement in Yekaterinburg. If you want to see what happened next, watch what happened to the Romanov family after the Tsar's execution.